us. Commissioner Anderson, are you here? Dave?
Present.
Excellent. Commissioner Harris?
Present.
Very good. Commissioner Duggan, I see you on the screen.
Yes, sir. Present.
Yes, indeed. Commissioner Keene? Commissioner Keene, you participated very actively in the prior committee meeting. I hope that doesn't translate to you having to take time off on the Water Allocation Committee. We'll come back to you. Commissioner Kelvington.
Yes, I'm here.
I see you. Okay. Commissioner Kelvington had contacted me and said she would be late, but we managed to delay the start of our meeting, and therefore working this out for you, Jenny. All right. And Commissioner Solomon has sent out a notice to a few of us saying that he will be unable to attend today because he's doing some presentations in the eastern part of the state, but he will be in the full Environmental Management Commission meeting tomorrow. So, Commissioner Keene, Steve, are you here? Okay, well, certainly we have a quorum anyway, and so we will go ahead and begin this. Initially, I will go through the conflict of interest statement that North Carolina General Statute 138A-15 mandates that I inquire as to whether any member knows of any conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to the matters that are to come before the EMC's Water Allocation Committee. And if any member knows of conflict or interest or appearance, please so state at this time. Anyone? Great. I hear none. And so we will move on. Before I get things otherwise started, I want to remind everyone that if we can stay into the succeeding committee meeting, the Water Quality Committee meeting, the first item on that agenda after their approval of the minutes will be a matter that pertains to us as well, and it would be great if we all participate in that as well. Okay, the minutes of the November 17 meeting got posted late. They got posted last night, but we appreciate them getting there, and I wonder if anyone has any corrections or comments to note as to the minutes. I thought they were very thorough and clear and understandable, and in fact, reading them helped me even get informed as to the items on today's agenda too. Do we have a motion for approval of these minutes?
This is David. So moved.
Okay, Commissioner Anderson moves. Second.
This is Chris. Second.
Okay, Commissioner Duggan, good. I didn't want Commissioner Anderson's motion to die for lack of second. Calling the roll, Commissioner Anderson. If everyone would go ahead and unmute. Commissioner Anderson.
Approve.
Commissioner Harris.
Approve.
Commissioner Duggan.
Aye.
Commissioner Kelvington.
Aye.
I vote aye also. Is Commissioner Keene with us? Okay, all right. The motion passes and the minutes stand approved. Thank you all very much. Okay, we have an action item here on our agenda. It's the request of approval by the Water Allocation Committee to proceed to the EMC with the water use regulation and allocation rules in 15A NCAC 02E.0400, the regulation of surface water transfers. And we're going to turn to Linwood Peel of the Division of Water Resources to give us a presentation on this.
Good afternoon, Chairman McAdams. Can you see my screen?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, well, I'll get started. Good afternoon again to Chairman McAdams and the commission members. My name is Linwood Peel, and I'm with the Water Planning section of the Division of Water Resources. And today we are requesting approval to proceed to the Environmental Management Commission with the proposed rule readoptions for the water use, registration, and allocation rules in 15A NC-AC 02E Section 0400 Regulation of Surface Water Transfers for public notice and hearing. We're bringing the last section of the water use, registration, and allocation rules to you today, which is, as I said, 0400 Regulation of Surface Water Transfer. At this time, I would like to just give you a brief timeline of the 0400 rules, readoption history, and kind of let you know why they're coming the second part, separate rules. The Rules Review Commission determination was made that the rules were necessary with substantive public interest in January 2017, and we began rulemaking to readopt the O2E rules at that time. Then in July of 2017, the Union County IBT was contested, and we were asked by the Attorney General's office in August of 2017 to stop drafting the rules, the IBT rules, because of concerns that we could be just repeating ourselves later. The contested case was settled fall of 2018, and then rule drafting continued, and in the summer of 2020, Session Law 2020-79 required the Department of Environmental Quality to study the statutes and rules governing sub-basin transfers and make recommendations as to whether they should be amended. The report was due January 15, 2021 to the Environmental Review Commission. And the concern was it was possible that the legislative report would affect the rule drafting and readoption process. So in July of 2020, we requested that the Rule Review Commission split the O2E rules, and therefore the Rules Review Commission accepted the proposal, and we split and currently have the 0100, 0300, 0500, 0600 that was due March 1st, 2022, and the 0400 due March 1st, 2023, 1 year later. Internal development of the rules, of the draft rules, completed in January 2021. Then we got asked the Rules Review Commission to pre-review, and they conducted that and gave it back to us in April of 2021, and we incorporated their comments by June of 2021. And then DWR solicit stakeholders' comments from all water systems that are required to do local water supply plan, which was 556 water systems that fall under that statute, and the Water Allocation Committee listserv, which had 309 people. And after that 45-day process, we received 17 comment letters, which included 107 comments. And of course, they was all different parts of the rule. And Mr. Harold Brady updated the Water Allocation Committee on the rule readoption timeline during his IBT update in November of 2021. Therefore, our proposed rulemaking schedule going forward is as follows. Today, we are requesting that the Water Allocation Committee to approve the draft rules to go to the full EMC in March of 2022. And then in March of 2022, we will ask the Environmental Management Commission to approve draft rules for public notice. We will notice and hold public hearings from April 2022 through June 2022. Then review the comments and draft a hearing officer report with the hearing officer from the summer of 2022 through September of 2022. And our schedule is to request that the Environmental Management Commission to adopt the final rules in November 2022, then Rules Review Commission review and approval in December 2022. And our goal is to have the rules become effective by January 1st, 2023. And if you notice the time step, we only have 2 months where the rules are due March 1st, 2023. So we try to stay on schedule. In summary of key revisions, today I'm going to try to give you some just example of each rule, just at least one example of what we're trying to clear up. We are providing some examples of procedure explanations provided in the draft rules that is not in the IBT statute. As you may know, the statute is very prescriptive, but we are trying to develop rules to provide better guidance to applicants to make the IBT process easier to navigate. Starting with in section 0401, we added the purpose of the rule. And in section 0402, we added definitions, and we added several definitions. I just want to highlight a couple here. such as primary applicant and co-applicant. That was during the comment period, a lot of people asked what was the difference between those two words. And so we put explanations there, and hopefully the definitions are clear. And then emergency transfer, that went around and around defining that definition as well. Then major river basin and grandfather capacity. We always had guidance, but the statute really doesn't break down. But our definition here in the rules, it lays out the three system elements considered and defines the calculation for each. So we're just trying to explain things to be more clear for the applicants. In section 0403, we moved applicability section to the rule section. It was originally in 0401, and we added language for grandfather transfers, such as we spell out the data needed for water balance demonstration and the time period. And then section 0404, we added notification language. It's in the statute that notification is limited to a single newspaper, but we try to just make it clear, newspaper per county. We just try to make it clearer. And then section 0405, we added language for the types of environmental documentation needed, and we explain and define the planning period of 30 years presented in 10-year increments, which is reflected in the required local water supply plan for DWR to be able to compare the two and make sure they're the numbers are consistent. And then in section 0406, we added language for requirements in a petition. It provides the procedures for meeting the water conservation requirements and described in the statute. It's in both, but we try to make it clearer, better defined in the rule. And in section 0407, we added language clarifying the settlement and mediation process, and that's such as it directs the affected party to use the guidance already approved by the Environmental Management Commission. And then last two, the section 0408, we added language clarifying what items the commission may need to make a final determination that hasn't been provided. And so it provides the procedures for meeting the water conservation requirements and others that additional information that the Environmental Management Commission can ask for. Then the last section is section 0409, added language clarifying emergency and temporary transfers and defined conditions necessitating an emergency transfer. And just give you an idea, out of the 107 comments, 25 of them wanted to in the section of 409, emergency transfer. 18 comments came from the temporary transfer comments, and then 15, followed by the third graders, was 15 was dealing with the definitions. So just to give you an idea of the comments, and they was very extensive, and maybe to also help, we had out of the 17 comment letters, 10 of them were water systems, both municipalities, counties, and it was 2 authorities in there. Then the Triangle Water Partnership, we had North Carolina Rural Water Association, we had North Carolina Water Quality Association, we had North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, we had comment from North Carolina Division of Water Resources, EnviroLink, and actually one citizen provided some really good comments as well. And so today we're here to request approval to proceed to the Environmental Management Commission with water use registration and allocation rules in 15A NCAC 02E 0400, which is the regulation of surface water transfers. And just one other update, staff is currently working on the regulatory impact analysis for Office of State Budget and Management approval, and we're working with our economists and also staff on OSBM to try to wrap that up. So with that, it was brief, but I wanted to, if there's any questions that you may have, I'm here to answer the questions, but our request is here.
Thank you. Thank you, Linwood, and thank you for pushing right through that. There may be questions. Do members of the Water Allocation Committee have questions of Linwood Peel? I have one, just procedural. The staff is currently working on regulatory impact analysis for OSMB. Is it unusual that the Environmental Management Commission would go ahead and approve the draft rules for public notice, which we're in the position of advising the EMC to do, without the regulatory impact analysis complete, or is it more typical that that follows along later in the process?
Last year, the same thing happened. In January of last year, with the first set of rules, the staff was working on the regulatory impact analysis. But by last March, we'll have it ready. Before the EMC meeting. Last year, the same.
Okay,
it was
before the
same situation.
EMC meeting.
Yes, correct.
Therefore, and therefore certainly before the public hearings.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions? I have heard Harold Brady's presentation on IBTs at a number of public hearings, and I have agreed to be the hearing officer on the impending Fuquay-Varina IBT. So I have become exposed to some of these materials before, and I read the enclosed draft rule that seems to be very well done. But I have a few editorial comments on them, and I don't know that they're not really fundamental, but I think some things in them are ambiguous. And I seek guidance. Do I run through them quickly now, or do we do this after the fact? And I think all of this is very approvable, but I just have some tweaks I suggest to be considered, that's all.
Well, you can pose the questions now, but all of that will be part of the public comment. Anything that we get between now and the comment period in March after the EMC, all of that will be taken into account. But if it's certain things you want to ask us just in general now, and I have Harold Brady on the line as well, in its specifics that I can't answer. He's here to answer as well, or however you would like to handle it.
Well, okay. In one respect, I'd feel more comfortable just doing it to you and to Harold outside of this meeting with everybody's time. And yet we're going to be recommending that this go forward for approval by the EMC. I don't think what I have is substantive enough that the EMC would then be receiving a different document. But if anyone has that concern, then I'll do these things now.
Well, I think we can always ask Philip what's the proper process, our councilman.
Yeah, okay. Councilor Reynolds, do you have a comment on this?
Are you asking me that question now, or are you saying that you'll follow up with me on it?
Asking now.
Sorry? I couldn't hear. What was that?
We're asking now.
Okay, so and can you repeat the question for me?
Well, I'm going to suggest a few tweaks to the wording in the rule as it is drafted.
Okay.
Is
That's
that
what
concern, then, if I do that after this meeting to the staff, that which the committee has acted on to recommend to the EMC to approve has gotten tweaked a little bit after such recommendation to the EMC.
So if the committee acts now before a tweak is made, then the recommendation would proceed to the EMC as written.
Okay.
But no member of the committee nor of the full commission would be prohibited from offering amendment to the language at that time. It's just simply that the amendment would not have been viewed ahead of time when it got forwarded to the full commission. In other words, you can either do the work now or do the work at the commission meeting, because the modifications would have to be made if after this vote, if they're suggested after this vote, they'd have to be made via an amendment to the rules as proposed and not as part of the recommendation from the committee.
Got it. Okay. Councilor Reynolds, if I may just interject right now, thank you very much. I understand that. And now I'm realizing I could have put these comments out in only a little bit more time than we've already taken. I'm going to go ahead and do that now, if I can. Linwood, do you have the rules right there?
Yes.
All right. Page 2, line item 25, it's in the definitions. Discharge capacity is defined.
Yes, sir.
Okay, discharge capacity on line 25. On line 26, it goes into a new definition, I think. The interbasin transfer certificate is a new definition.
Okay.
And I concur with that, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Well, let's see. On page 3 of 10, line item 5, for water systems that involve crossing multiple river basin boundaries, the primary applicant represents the transfer pipe owner where the first river basin boundary crossing occurs. It just struck me as different from what should be. It feels to me like it's more appropriate that the applicant is the one actually doing the discharge to a different basin. But maybe not. Just something to consider.
Okay. And that was page 10, line.
That's page 3 of 10.
Page 3, line, yeah.
Line 5.
Okay, page 3, line. Okay.
Page 3, line 28. In the middle of that line, there's the two words between and by, and they are in juxtaposition with each other. Is one or the other of those words to be chosen, or is there a slash between them? The transmission of all or any part of this water between by one of the entities.
I think that's supposed to be a slash there. I'll work with Harold and David to
Okay.
fix that.
On page 4 of 10, line item 22, this occurs twice in there, and you have even referred to it, Linwood, in your presentation just now. And that is the baseline year and projected data for a minimum of 30 years into the future in no less than 10-year intervals. And that's in there later also, no less than 10-year intervals. So a 25-year interval is okay? Or is it intended to say no more than 10-year intervals? So you can do it in 9 or 8 or 5-year intervals.
Yes, that should be more.
Okay.
Because we
And
want
that's in
them
there
in
twice.
10-year intervals. But if it falls on an off
And
year.
intervals of no longer than 10 years each.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
On that same page, and I skipped over it earlier, up on line 4, it refers to potable water, and I wonder why specifically potable water, untreated water, raw water that is ultimately discharged into a different basin is also an interbasin transfer, is it not?
Yes, it is. But I think because it's going from one water system to another, it's been treated, and that's terminology need to be
Okay.
more general. It needs, but I understand the
Okay.
someone interpretation. Yes.
Well, and maybe it stands. These are just, I'm a comparative layman to those who have really poured their expertise and attention into this. I'm just raising things.
Okay.
And then on line item 26 of the same page, a small matter, a copy of the grandfathered water transfer capacity worksheet can be obtained. It can be obtained. It strikes me as unusual in a rule. It shall be available free of charge. Is it?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It shall be obtained. It
Yeah.
doesn't cost anything. We have it on the website and so forth. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's the wording there.
Okay. On page 5, line item 13, notification is to be printed in a single newspaper. You commented on this too, and I understand that, and somehow the word does need to get out. But boy, newspapers are less and less and less the means by which people learn of things. I don't have an alternative to that. Maybe that's fine, but I just thought I am so old school personally, that warmed my heart. I do read the newspaper, but who else does? Just a comment there.
Yeah.
And that's a requirement, Mr. McAdams. The
Okay,
general circulation is a requirement. In fact, that was an issue in the Montgomery County, Union County, Montgomery County dispute over the Union County interbasin transfer. So,
okay.
yeah.
All right, fine. And then finally, last comment, finally we're there. Page 6 of 10. The lines 1 and 2 have the conducted on 10-year increments at a minimum. And that needs to be clarified. 10-year increments at a maximum, or no less frequently than every 10 years, something like that, I think is what's intended there.
Okay. Yes, we want it to be clear. We want it to be clear. So if there's any.
Okay, these are just the things that struck me. And again, I'm not a rule writer, but that's just what struck me in writing the rules. Now, have I caused a problem by suggesting changes that need some reflection? We really don't want this matter to be delayed in going to the EMC because it's required to be approved by March 1 of 2023. And we're on that track right now. And so, if it needs further consideration, then maybe the thing to do is recommend approval of what is already written without reference to my comments.
Mr. Chairman, if I may suggest something, if the committee at large is comfortable with the recommendations and changes that you've made, and in fact that including the direction to the staff to clarify the 10-year interval language, if they're comfortable moving forward with that and asking the staff to ensure that the language is provided ahead of time when the matter comes before the full commission, then I think it's fine to do that, again, if that's the pleasure of the committee, because the purpose of going to the EMC at this point is to then go out to public notice, at which point comments will be received and further changes will be made or recommended in response to those comments. So I don't think it would be a procedural faux pas or issue, again, depending on the agreement of the committee, to move forward with what I would consider the relatively limited changes you have suggested, such that they can move forward to the full commission with the recommendation that the department be allowed to proceed to public notice and comment.
Okay, well, thank you. Good. Are there other I'm sorry? Councilor Reynolds, were you saying something?
No, sir, I was just hitting mute on my button so I would stop taking up all the committee's time.
Okay, you're not doing that. Okay. Okay, Commissioner Kelvington, are you wishing to say something? No? Okay, fine. All right. Is there anyone else that wishes to make a comment or observation about these draft rules that are before us for our recommendation to the EMC for them to approve these rules to go to public hearing?
Mr. Chairman, this is Pat Harris. I just have a question. We kind of went over it and I should have asked then, but on the regulatory impact analysis, can staff give us any indication with the proposed rule changes if it is causing more hardship on the regulated community, or is this just pretty standard and not foresee a lot of impact to the regulatory community? So I was just curious, not knowing whether I know we don't have OSBM approval, but just asking about it itself.
Yes. In the conversations with OSBM, they didn't see any hardship or changes because we're not changing the statute. The statute is very prescriptive, but we're trying to make the rules that are clear. So we're not adding any requirements. We're just trying to clarify it. And one of the things that working with OSBM, they feel that the statutes are so clear that some of the rules that we're writing is going back and forth in the conversation. Do you really need this rule? And we feel that we have a lot of guidance and things that we need to have in rules to help the applicants. going forward. So to answer your question, the OSBM, it wasn't an issue with financial or money or burden on local governments or anyone. It was just some of the clarification because they felt that like the statute and the rules was saying the same thing. And it may appear to some people that it is saying the same thing, but we're just trying to make it clear. So the answer is no.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, it's Steve King. Question to
Yes.
Linwood then. You mentioned the stakeholders and you had several responses and you broke that down. Do you remember right off on the regulatory committee or the stakeholders on did they have any issues with it?
Well, a lot of them, they felt that the rules, it narrowed things down, and some of the statute was more vague, and that's the purpose of the rules, is try to guide people based on the non-certificate that we do have in place since the program was put in place. We're trying to use that, but most of the comments, like I said, 107 comments, it was on both sides. For instance, I mentioned emergency transfer had 25 different comments. Some people felt that we need, they helped us with the definitions, and it was on both sides. Some said it needs to be expanded, some needs to be narrow. So it was on both sides. When you're writing, it tends to be on both sides. So, just in general, the comments was, yes, this helps to make it clear, but then sometimes they said when you make things so clear, people can't expand their process, or it's narrowing it down too much. So we had some of that as well.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Linwood.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman, it's Robin Smith. I have one question.
yes, Chair Smith.
And that's on the second page, I guess there's a definition of grandfathered capacity. And then over on page 4, there's a section at line 9 that talks about calculating a grandfathered transfer. Are those referring to the same thing or different things? And if they're different things, do we need a definition of grandfathered transfer?
They're not the same. A grandfather transfer, and maybe the answer to your question is maybe yes, but a grandfather transfer is based on the history. What occurred when the statute was put in place. What was your capacity at that time? And the worksheets explain that in the worksheets itself. And that's why the definitions was we provided one of the definitions and not the other.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Chair Smith, I erred in not asking if you were present. You're ex officio member of every one of these committees, and I apologize for that oversight.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay. Well, thank you for being part of this meeting. And Commissioner Keene, welcome. You were not there as we called the roll, but let the minutes reflect that you're in attendance at this meeting. Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there other comments on this recommendation to the EMC to go to public hearing? If not, does anyone care to make a motion? In accordance with what's on our screen right now.
Mr. Chairman, this is Pat Harris. I'll make the motion for us to request approval to proceed to the EMC with the water use registration and allocation rules in 15A NCAC 02E.0400.
Thank you, Commissioner Harris. Does
Mr.
Commissioner
Chair.
Harris's motion have a second?
Mr. Chair, before we proceed to a second, if I could ask for some clarification as to
Yes.
whether that the motion is intended to allow for the changes that you described and discussed earlier.
Absolutely, Councilor Reynolds. But before Commissioner Harris responds on that, let me ask Linwood Peel. are there some of these things I have brought up that I think maybe there are that require a little bit of pondering? They're not all just quick editorial changes, like making the one of those definitions be a standalone definition. That's just a formatting. Do you have a feel for the nature of any of these?
Well, the comments that you made seems pretty simple, but I think we always have to ponder on everything, because when you have comments from all the stakeholders and they're on both sides, we want to make sure that we listen and address their concerns. But right off the top, I didn't hear you say anything that I think would be contrary to what they want. But at the same time, I don't want to give a direct answer and then we start making all the corrections and realize stakeholders wanted more flexibility or something.
Since I am the one that raised 5 or 6 issues, a handful of issues here, let me suggest this, that we agree that the changes as to just breaking apart what is now definition 7 discharge capacity, make that 7 and 8, and the interbasin transfer certificate be a separate one. Okay, that's just formatting. And that the not less than 10 years in the modeling, that be clarified. Those, I think, are pretty incontrovertible changes. In that this go forward to the EMC just with those adjustments only. And the rest, just wait for subsequent points in the process.
Okay.
And then I asked Commissioner Harris, would that be acceptable in your motion?
If I understand this correctly, yes, Mr. Chairman. I think, to me, they were more editorial cleanups versus substantial changes. So when I made my motion, I was assuming, and maybe that's dangerous on my part, that staff would be taking these comments under consideration as part of a cleanup to these rules. So in answer to your question, yes, they are acceptable to me.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Now, do we have a second?
I've got a question, Mr. Chair, before we do that.
All right, Commissioner King?
Is there something that we can make more firm than an assumption? I'm wanting to second this, but I've just now thought that with Pat's comment, and the grandfather piece, that will all come out as we move forward, not making major changes, but can we make this part of moving to the EMC tomorrow with a motion that makes it more specific than just assumption?
By the way, it's not tomorrow. It's at the March meeting, but
I'm sorry, March meeting.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, March meeting.
But if we don't act on this now, then we lose 2 months. That's all.
Yes, yeah, I'm sorry, March meeting, yes.
Yeah, right. All right. Chair Smith, are you wishing to come? Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. All right. So Commissioner King, instead of moving forward on an assumption, I'm sorry, but as to what?
Commissioner Harris made the motion, but then she came back and she was talking about assuming, but let's be more specific that it will be discussed by staff and brought to us with these changes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I made my motion based on that assumption. You are correct, Commissioner King, but we are taking draft rules to public notice. So I'm going to, I'm not going to use the word assumption, but as public notice, more information is going to rise and have to be addressed to these rules. So I felt like they would be massaged, let's say, more as it goes through this process. All I'm approving, and if you want me to put it conceptually, but then it just confuses it more. So that's where my motion, why I made the motion I made.
All right, I'll second that, Mr. Chairman. I'll second her motion.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner King. Other discussion by anyone? All right, well, let's vote. If you would all unmute Commissioner Anderson,
I approve.
Commissioner Harris,
Aye.
Commissioner Duggan,
Aye.
Commissioner Keen,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelvington.
Aye.
Okay, it passes unanimously, our recommendation to the EMC. I thank you all. All right. Now, we have handled our action item and on to an information item, which is the drought update and outlook. And Klaus Alberton, if I am saying that right, Klaus, and Linwood Peel will make a presentation on this.
Well, good afternoon again, Chairman McAdams and Commission members. I will start the presentation off. Klaus, if you can go to the next slide. I would like to provide a brief history on our drought monitoring and response process and talk a little bit about drought monitoring and response. And then I'll pass it over to Klaus to talk about drought assessments and determination, how they do the weekly drought assessment process. And then we have time for Q&A. Next slide, please. Because of the mid-'80s drought, Division of Water Resources developed a drought monitoring council. It was an ad hoc council that just worked through the emergency operations plans of emergency management, and it served as an interagency coordinator group and provided information exchange on drought conditions and so forth. But in 2002, after the 1998 to 2002 drought, it was renamed the Drought Manager Advisory Council, and it was given statutory authority in 2003, and it increased the scope, to include monitoring and coordinating drought responses with different agencies at that time. And it was assigned a new advisory role, and in the statute, it specifies certain drought advisories and things that had to be technical based and shared with different agencies, such as the Secretary, the Governor's Office, the Environmental Management Commission, Environmental Review Commission, and so forth. And then in 2008, our Madam Chair Smith, she worked with the Environmental Review Commission and then to improve drought preparedness because of the 2007-2008 drought in North Carolina. It became the leading regulatory arm of the drought management in North Carolina. And one of the things during that time, it was a lot of groups lobbying to be on the council, to persuade the council to go certain ways, but they added in details about members, what type of expertise to have on the group, and they wanted people to have meteorological, groundwater, surface water hydrology, water system operations and management, reservoir management, and emergency response. People have different interests. So next slide, Klaus. In the Drought Manager Advisory Council, one of the things that, as I mentioned, they established Drought Manager Council, and the purpose of it is to improve coordination among local, state, and federal agencies, public water systems, also reservoir operators, as well as other agencies that being affected by drought and drought management and drought responses. And also it provided a consistent and accurate information on drought conditions, and to provide to the U.S. Drought Monitor, as I mentioned, the EMC, the Secretary, ERC, and the public. And as you can see, I'm not going to cover all the agencies, but there has a wide swath of agencies, state and federal and local, that have expertise in the hydrology and drought criteria. Next slide, Klaus. And as I mentioned earlier, the two main arms of our regulatory provisions is Section Law 2008-143, which is the Act to Improve Drought Preparedness and Response in North Carolina, as recommended by the Environmental Review Commission. And also the rules that we just had readopted in January 1st of this year was the old 600 rules, water use during drought. And the purpose of this is to minimize the harmful impact of drought and water supply emergencies on public health, safety, and environmental quality. And the economy by establishing minimum standards for, water short response planning, which was a key component, water use reporting during drought time, and water conservation and water reuse during droughts and water emergencies. Next slide, Klaus. And for water systems, this is probably the biggest regulatory provision that was in the drought rules. Is the 0606, which is the water shortage response plan. And the purpose of this is to make sure water system had a consistent process. It didn't matter what size system or what type system, but had an effective course of action to minimize harmful impacts of droughts and water emergencies. But one of the things it had to do is take into account of specific characteristics of a water source and the water use for which the plan is prepared. And before this was in place, there was a broad swath. The former governors, they would say cut back 20%, and they were talking about all types of water users. And this has to be tailored to your type of system. If your reservoir system, groundwater system, and all of them are affected differently by drought. And this right here really tailored to water systems, so they'll be responsible for their own water supply and how they do that. And so, Section 606, it really governs, water systems themselves. And next slide, Klaus. And the statute that we have, the rules, as well as the session law, really has, I guess, its biggest effect during D3 and D4, extreme and exceptional droughts. And they require weekly water use reporting. And also, it continue to provide drought advisories and updates to all citizens, as well as the governor's office, secretary's office, the EMC as well. Of course, if drought persists, we can enact the emergency operation plan, which involves the state emergency response team as well as task forces. And there's 5 task forces. And really quick: agriculture, led by North Carolina Department of Agriculture Community Service; economic impact, led by the North Carolina Department of Commerce; energy loss, led by DEQ's Demler; and health task force, led by the Department of Health and Human Services; and then the water sources is led by DEQ's Division of Water Resources. And these task forces provide drought assessments, impact identification, determine priorities, and report to the Drought Manager Advisory Council. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the important component is Section 0605, where we have regional coordination to avoid conflicts and maximize cooperations, where DEQ hold regional meetings to communicate, and we did a lot of that during 2007, during the 2007-2008 drought. And the next slide, now I'm going to turn it over to Klaus Aberton to introduce himself. Klaus?
All right. Thank you, Linwood. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Great. Again, I'm Klaus Alberton. I'm part of DWR's planning section, and I'm also the chair of the Drought Council that Linwood was talking about. And today, I'm going to give a fairly abridged version of the process that we go through each week to determine drought conditions throughout the state, because there is a lot of questions about how those determinations actually come about. And it is a fairly involved process. So we thought going through some of the slides would give you a sense of how that actually happens each week. So beginning of each call, and we have, during these weekly calls, we usually have USGS, the climate office, usually 2 to 3 folks from the Weather Service, representative from the different reservoir operations, ag extension. So most of those agencies that Linwood talked about do call in each week and see what conditions look like and give their input to come up with the final determination that we give up to the federal level to the U.S. Drought Monitor that becomes part of the national map. So we start off each week looking at how conditions were previously, and then we go into the state climate office talks about what sort of rainfall we got during the week. This presentation that I'm going through is from December 28th, because we do our meetings each week. So the meeting that we did yesterday gets published, will get published tomorrow. So we had to go back 1 week. This is right after we got the heavy rains, the 2 to 3 inches, pretty much statewide. So, we talk about accumulation for the previous week, and then we look at, longer time frame, how much we got for the month. We'll look at how that compares to what we normally would get during that period. So this is the normal rainfall or percent of normal that we got. And again, that big 2 to 3 inch rain event we got about 2 weeks ago really had a big impact, brought things close to normal for the month. And then we look at other metrics. This is the standardized precipitation and evaporation index. So not just rainfall, but how it connects with other factors such as evapotranspiration, temperature. Then we go out to 60 days. You can look at, what kind of deficit we're seeing over these time periods. So even though we got 2 to 3 inches of rain in that event, when you look at the 2-month period, a lot of areas in the state are 2 to 4 inches, maybe up to 6 inches behind what they should be for that 2-month period. And we'll look at 3 months and 4 months, just to really see how, is there something that's still lingering that may not look too bad this month, but is an area really still looking fairly dry over a longer period of time. And then we do get a forecast from the National Weather Service. They give us the daily updates on what kind of precipitation we might expect, when it would occur, and then a longer term outlook. We're not allowed to really consider the rainfall that's forecasted as part of what the drought determination is going to be. So if they say, well, we're expecting a rain event tomorrow, that can't be part of what the drought determination looks like. So we base it on rainfall and conditions prior to 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning, but it does help us, just the whole group, get a sense of, are things going to be better? Are things typically going to be staying the same, or are they going to be drier? A lot of what had caused the drought that we saw this winter was La Nina. So Weather Service may talk about what some of the bigger drivers are for conditions to get us where we are, and then also what may change in the longer term going forward. And then we get input from citizens across the state. It's called the COCO-RAS condition monitoring system, but it's a set of people who have put up a specific rain gauge and regularly provide input on what kind of conditions they're seeing. And that really helps us understand, not just looking at precipitation maps, but getting people's feedback on what they actually see, in their yards, in their farms, in their, local areas. And then we get input from Usgs. This is just showing the average 28-day flows and what percentile they're at. So in the fall, things were looking pretty good. And then once we started just not getting the rainfall we would in October and November, this blue line is stations that are at flows that are lower than their 25th percentile. So really a big drop, really significant drying out in the state. And then we did get the 2 to 3 inch rainfall, which stopped that decline and kind of kept things, stopped it and got things to a plateau. The pink line is a number of stations that are below the 10th percentile. And then we actually had a number of stations below their minimum recorded history. And then we also look just to get a spatial sense of that chart. We look at the same sort of information, 10th percentile, 25th percentile of flows, but where is that occurring? And even after the big rainfall, we see that still the southern coastal plain and a little bit also going north, and then the mountains are the areas that are still showing lower than normal in-stream flows. Then we look at DWR's groundwater well network, and it's a set of wells that show where conditions, where water levels are compared to where they should be, and different ways to look at it, being spatially, and then we can actually look at individual wells to see, back in July, August, we were in good shape, and then things really started to drop as conditions dried out, and then we actually got to being below the monthly minimum for that station. Then we transition into reports from the different reservoir operators. Army Corps of Engineers calls in. Duke Energy reports on their reservoir levels, TVA, and also Cube Hydro. So each one talks about what they're seeing for their reservoirs, what kind of operations they're doing. Throughout the drought that we're having this winter, Army Corps of Engineers and Duke both started operating very conservatively, really just releasing the minimum amount that they needed to operate normally, but no more than that, just to conserve water in case the drought did continue as it was looking like it would. And then we get a report from the Forest Service, and this map shows the potential for fires. So they were talking about really the northeast part of the state was looking worse, and then it improved because of the significant rainfall that we got. And they talk about the number of fires they've seen in the previous month and how that tracks compared to normal for the year. And then we get a really good report from the Ag Extension. They get input from different offices across the state, and they tell us our farmers seeing issues with dryness, what kind of issues, how extensive it is. And again, it's another really helpful way to get on the ground information about what really the impacts are across the state. And then finally, water systems provide input as far as what their conservation status is. Are they going into mandatory conservation, or are they still in voluntary conservation, or do they not need to have conservation just yet? And these statuses are based on the water shortage response plans that Linwood mentioned. And then finally, the whole group talks about what they've seen and comes up with a recommendation that we do provide to the U.S. Drought Monitor for the national map. And then the result of, again, we had pretty significant severe drought. That's this darker orange going from west of Charlotte all the way to the northeast of the coast. And a couple inches, 2 to 3 inches of rain had almost statewide improvements. So one category improvements, most areas going from severe drought went to moderate, and then a lot of areas that were in moderate drought went down to just abnormally dry. And that summarizes real briefly what we talk about each week and how the process goes. I want to thank everybody for their interest in the process and open it up to any questions.
Okay. Well, thank you, Klaus Alberton and Linwood Beal. Really interesting presentation on the study of drought performance in our state. Does anyone have any question for either of the presenters? Anyone at all? All right, well, let me assure both Klaus and Linwood that does not mean that we're not interested. We are about 30 minutes over our scheduled time to begin with, but this, I found this fascinating. Thank you for being there and doing this work for our state. Thank you very much. Does anyone else have anything to come before our committee? Does anyone have any member of the Water Allocation Committee have any comments you would like to make? All right. Hearing none.
John,
Yes, Steve
Steve
King.
King. I wanted to also tell those, I really appreciate that information. That opened my eyes on a lot of different particular areas in the state, particularly in the Southeast. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. All right. Okay, any other comments? All right, well then I will call this meeting adjourned, and I thank you all. And I ask again that all of us remain for at least the first item on the Water Quality Committee's agenda immediately to follow this meeting. Commissioner Deerhake, are you tuned in? Can you tell us how quickly from now you will start that committee meeting?
Thank you, Mr. McAdams. Can everyone hear me okay? I am ready to go. It looks like we have everyone here. Let me do a very quick roll call.